Hi, welcome to this week's Authors Love Readers podcast, where we delve into the stories behind the stories. We're asking authors questions, some of them fun, some of them serious, and from their answers, you're going to learn things you never knew about the people who write the stories you love. My name is Patricia McLinn. I'm your host and designated question asker.
I'm Barbara O'Neill, and I'm an author who loves readers.
Now, let's start the show. Hi, and welcome to this week's edition of Authors Love Readers podcast. I have with me today Barbara O'Neill, who is a fabulous writer, and we go back quite a way. I was thinking about this, and I don't know if you remember I'm sure it's the first time that we met. It had a big impact on me, Barbara, and I don't know that I've ever told you that.
I am so intrigued.
We were both writing for Silhouette, Harlequin. At that time, it was just Silhouette. And it was at a conference, and it was in a hotel suite. It must have been some sort of open house type thing or something. And I met you and Emily Brightwell, who now writes as Emily Brightwell. And I had seen your work and thought, wow, she is going so well with them. She's doing so great, and they love her, and they're giving her a great schedule, and things are really going terrific for her. And you guys came up to me and said, wow, things are going really great for you, and they must love you. And I thought, oh, okay.
Right.
It was that moment that crystallized the lesson that how things look from the outside are not necessarily how they are or how they feel from the inside. So tell the listeners what kind of books you are writing and have written.
That's a pretty big list. Right at the moment, my main focus, and it has been for about the past 10 years, is women's fiction with some strong romantic elements in it. All of my books do have a romance at the center of them, but they also have a lot of other things in them. So that's Barbara O'Neill, and that's the main focus. I also write some new adult or younger romances as Lark O'Neill, and that started just sort of as a
As a lark?
Yeah, as it was. There's actually a great story of how that name came to be, but I will tell it another time. But that really was just sort of a way to get my feet wet in a different genre in the indie publishing. And I also write romances and historical romances as Barbara Samuel.
So you started with contemporary romance with Silhouette, and then pretty quickly you started the historicals, right? Because you were doing both at the same time?
Yeah, I was doing both. They weren't publishing me as fast as I could write, because like you, I came out of the newspaper business, and I could write a lot faster than they would publish me. So I loved historical romances, and I tried my hand there. So that was probably just a couple of years after Silhouette. And then it was like probably not until another 10 years before I started writing women's fiction.
What nudged you from the romance to the women's fiction? Was it a story idea, or was it how did you make that transition, or what caused you to?
Really, when I started writing, that kind of book didn't really have as big of a market as it began to have. So I always like telling stories about women's friendships and about families. I have a really big, complicated family, and so a lot of those issues are interesting to me, and how you love people of all different kinds through your life. So you can get some of those stories into category romance, but the readers protest if you get too much of it. So that there came a story that I really just couldn't tell in the special edition format, and that's when I shifted.
Did you get told by Silhouette that you were pushing the envelope?
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Because your books have both a depth of character and of writing that aren't necessarily necessary to tell the story of the romance, which is what those books were focused at, and that was their purpose. That was their reason for being. And I just wondered if I got told I had too much plot all the time.
I don't really remember anything like that. It was more that like often I would tell sort of multi-ethnic stories because that's really, my life is sort of multi-ethnic. And that was sort of pushing the envelope with special edition at the time. And also just sort of stylistic things. I remember when I wrote The Last Chance Ranch, each of the chapters is opened with a letter from the mud prison to her son who's being cared for by the man that is eventually the hero of the book. And they first said, no, you can't write this book. And I said, well, they told me I had to take the letters out. And I said, well, I don't really think I could tell the story without those letters. That's how I'm going to tell the backstory. And they said, well, sorry, no, we're not going to do it. And like 4 months later, Leslie Wenger called me. She goes, okay, you can do it your way. I was like, what? Okay. But that book actually won some serious awards. So it was worth it for all of us.
And tell us the title again.
The Last Chance Ranch.
Okay. Is that one you have the rights back to now?
I do.
You've reissued that?
Yes, I have.
Yay!
Yay! I have almost all of them back, actually.
That's terrific.
That's
lucky. Wonderful. And for the readers who might not understand this, when we sell a book, we sell the rights to publish it. I was going to say we don't sell the book forevermore, but actually some contracts do come pretty darn close to that.
Pretty close.
And then if you meet certain conditions in the contract, then the rights revert to the author. And also, as the business has changed, there have been opportunities for us to ask for the rights back, even if we were not totally in that pocket in the contract. And we authors, many of us have gotten rights back, but not all the authors have gotten all their rights back.
Right.
And I had mine back. I was asking for them back very early. There was nothing to do with them. Nothing. There was no place to take them. It was pure stubbornness that I wanted them in my hot little hand.
You were very smart. I got the rights back to my historicals early, and I don't really remember why. I think it was more of an agent issue that I wanted to have control over them, over an agent that I had a conflict with. And with the contemporaries, with Silhouette, I just happened, my son is a lawyer, and he came home for Christmas before Harlequin shut the doors and said, oh no, none of these rights. And he wrote me a letter that I sent to the rights department, and they were like, sure, here you go. And I mean, it was not even weeks before they really cracked down. So I just slid right under the wire, just pure luck.
Oh, that's terrific. That's terrific. It's yeah. And that's allowed us then to reissue them, put different covers on. I've re-edited a couple of mine. A lot of them stand up just fine, but a few of them I felt like they were not totally the story I'd wanted to write. And I got the chance to go back and redo it. So I love that.
Yeah, I have redone some of them, not all of them, but there's probably more that I would like to do more too if I had more time.
Well, that's the never-ending editing cycle. I think I could go back.
Right.
I could just spend the rest of my life changing books. One of the things I've discovered in the books that were originally published by Silhouette, apparently in every book I had at least one scene where somebody accompanied somebody else to the gate at an airport. So I was having to rewrite that scene, and it felt like every book. I know other people have complained about that their whole plot hinged on using a payphone, they were like,
right.
So
it's kind of crazy how much some of those underlying things you take for granted have changed. They're like, I had two characters making jokes about having a microwave. I said, okay, we have to change that one because they were kind of scared of the technology or something. It's just laughing my head off when I read it.
Well, and there's two schools of thought, and I think there's two schools of thought among the readers too, of whether you change it and update it, or whether you let the book be what it was at the time it was written. Like, I love to read books that were written in the 30s, particularly some mysteries. And I just accept them for what they are. Maybe it's too close to when we wrote those to do that yet. I don't know. So we'd have to hear from the readers. We got off on the writing, as I suspected we might, Barbara.
That happens.
Let me Yes. Let me ask you some of the questions to let the listeners and the readers get to know you as a person.
Okay.
So we'll start you. Well, this may not be. I was gonna say we'll start with an easy one, but it might not. What is your favorite taste?
Oh, that's really hard. Because I am just such a foodie, and my books are about food. But I would go with the thing I couldn't survive without is garlic.
Oh, interesting. What is the most unusual way that you use garlic?
I don't know if I use it in any way that's unusual. I just use really a lot of it in all kinds of things. And I do really like it roasted on fresh bread.
Oh, okay. Do you grow it?
I do. Tons of it. It's really easy to grow under any conditions, even in Colorado, which is where I live, which is a very challenging gardening environment.
So you grow a lot of your own fresh vegetables and
I wouldn't say a lot, but I do love to have tomatoes. I like to grow potatoes.
oh,
A lot of herbs. I love going out and picking my thyme and cilantro and various things like that. And I do love the garlic because I can grow enough garlic to see me through the entire winter until I have to plant the next year.
okay. So what's your favorite color, Barbara?
I am a watercolorist, so I think all colors are equally valuable.
Interesting. And how did you become a watercolorist?
I had to have surgery on my knees, and I didn't have anything to do for like 3 months, and I couldn't really write because, you're not really feeling that well and whatever. And I don't know, I just started watercoloring. I mean, it has become a complete passion, but it was really a strange little side tour. A friend of mine had posted some pictures, and I was like, oh, well, that might be something to do. And it just took off from there.
Had you ever had any background in drawing or perspective or
I
any
have.
art?
I had a lot. When I was a child, I was equally wedded to the idea of being a writer and an artist. And there's a lot of artists in my family. There's, painters, and there's a couple that are actually quite, sort of locally famous in their towns. Um, but when I was in the 10th grade, I had one of those horrible teachers, an art teacher, who really gave me a hard time. Up until that point, I took every art class I could ever get my hands on, and I went into high school with the same intention. And this art teacher, for some reason, just did not like me from day one. And he was cruel to me. He embarrassed me publicly. And in the end, I had
Oh,
worked really hard on a piece of art. And okay, I'm going to say that just like with my writing, I'm a lot more interested in ordinary things like, flowers and gardens
mm.
and love stories than I am in anything, pushing the limits. And I had a surrealistic picture of a Sphinx woman with crayon, and he marked it unsatisfactory, minus, 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 and threw it in a trash pile.
Oh my
And it was
gosh.
the worst. I mean, I've heard writers, as I teach writers, I've heard writers say that they have this kind of a wound. It's very common for creative people to get this, to get someone who is opposing them so hard. And I did not draw or paint or anything for like 25 years. I I was a photographer. I mean, I went into the darkroom. I became a photographer because that was how I did my outlet. But I just internalized his, I don't know, whatever, so deeply.
Well, and that's so interesting to me because you think that what would drive somebody to be a teacher would be wanting to encourage learning and exploring and kids in general. And yet, you're right. We have had a couple interviews on here where people encountered English teachers, and I had one junior year who told me I was not a writer. I would never be a writer. I might as well quit. And it was hard, but it also made me go, "The hell? The hell I will." So and the teacher I had the next year was a really good antidote to it. Well, it makes me think about characters and why would somebody with that approach or that temperament go into teaching?
I think there's a lot of people who don't want to be teachers, and especially if you're talking about an art teacher.
Mm,
He probably wanted to be an artist himself, and for whatever reason, he just didn't like me, you
hmm.
know, or I pushed his buttons or whatever. I'm sure he did it to other people as well as time went by. I mean, he didn't just be evil too.
I wonder also if there's some element of power.
Maybe.
I don't know if there'll be a mean teacher killed or murdered in one of my books.
Plotting? You
Yes,
can kill mine
absolutely.
if you want to. I'll give you mine. Kill him for me. I recently did an exercise in an art class, actually, that was, going back to sort of heal wounds. And that was the exercise, was to draw this art teacher or whatever. And for me, it was the art teacher, like to draw him and to put all the things that he said and made me feel, and then to eradicate them, like cross them out and write things over it and say, like you would say to your English teacher, I'm a writer anyway, and you didn't stop me. So I was like, look, I am an artist. You didn't stop me. But it was so cathartic.
Oh, that's terrific.
I'll send you his picture. His evil face. You can write a book about him. Kill him. I'll be so happy.
And now anybody who reads my murder mysteries will be thinking, oh, is that the art teacher? Is that the art teacher? Is that? And you'll never know, because I might change it into a woman.
There you go.
Probably all sorts of, But it is very cathartic to kill off people who annoy you.
Yes.
I will tell you that. And see, I do it for other people too.
I'm
an altruistic killer. So as long as we're talking about sort of this line, let's ask if you have any strong fears, and do you use them in your books?
I am not a particularly fearful person, but I am really afraid of heights. But I would never, and it's weird because I'm like a native of Colorado, so there's a lot of heights around here, but
yeah.
I wouldn't put it into a book because they do it in the movies all the time. It's sort of a joke between my partner and I. It's like, yep, there they are. They're going high again. They're always going to go high to scare you, to increase the tension. Nope, I'm not going high. I don't do it.
How about the feeling that you get when you're in a position where you're afraid of the height? Do you use that? Do you mind that for how characters feel when they're in a bad situation?
I would imagine that, like most writers, I mind everything.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, totally changing the subject, what sort of surprising jobs have you had?
I did a lot of the usual things, but my most unusual job, I think, was loading trucks for UPS for Christmas one year. I lost 15 pounds and I was not overweight at the time.
Oh, my gosh.
It was a really hard job, but I earned a ton of money. It was great. I was in college and I could do it during that short little, spell over Christmas. Yeah, it was great. And I would never have done it again.
I was going to ask you, did it tell you did not want to do that sort of work?
Never. Well, one of the things is all these packages on a belt and they're coming through and you have 3 trucks. So you had to get like the address right, the truck right, and the order right. And they were coming fast. So it was really, really hard work.
So not only physically challenging, but that concentration, I would bet.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That's really interesting too, because it's so different from, that you're very interested in the arts, and
right.
That's such a turn from that. My weird question, which is longer, your on your dominant hand, you're right-handed?
I am.
Your ring finger or your index finger?
My ring finger.
Okay.
Does that mean I'm very intelligent?
Of course it does. And I honestly, I started asking people and I had no idea what it meant. I was just curious because I've noticed that some people, one is longer and the other was longer. And then I did do actually some research, but I remember the gist of the research that I can't remember which finger it is. One of them being longer means that you were exposed to more testosterone in utero.
Oh. Huh.
And that it's often associated with, and this may be why I asked you the question, it's often associated with what I think of as being able to pack. So spatial orientation and being able, and so I think I was thinking of UPS trucks and trying to get maximum packages in.
Well, and I was, a friend of mine at a retreat said that she couldn't judge how much, if you're putting away leftovers, she couldn't figure out what size of dish to get to put the leftover food in. I'm like, you're kidding. And she's like, no. And it was like, we did the survey and some of us could figure it out and some of us couldn't, but it was like a volume thing, like an understanding of spatial whatever. It was fascinating.
Well, you have to go back and check if there was a correlation between them having longer ring finger, because I have longer ring finger too. And my brother-in-law refers to it as the family packing gene, that we will, that other people will put something in the trunk and they'll say, okay, it's full. And we're going, are you kidding? We got lots more in that. Forget it. And so I don't remember whether that means you have more or less testosterone in utero, but I think the ring finger is associated with the packing gene. That's my theory anyhow.
Well, I'm going to do this as a survey next time.
Let me know the results.
I
should go back and do more research and find out exactly what I'm talking about. Although it's been fun just to ask the question. Okay, do you have sayings that you use a lot? And do you have, do they come from your folks? Do you ever hear that, the mom or dad voice coming out of your mouth?
My father had so many sayings. I mean, they just echo in my head all the time. But I do have one thing that he used to say all the time. It's what's the worst that could happen? Weigh it out, get to the bottom line, and then make your choices.
Okay. So that wasn't necessarily go for it. It was assess the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
He also used to say, it's only money. It's only money. If you need to do something, you have to express it it's only money, which I don't necessarily think is always the best idea.
Yeah.
But, it is helpful in a sense of going ahead and investing in yourself and your life and your work.
Have you faced situations where it was dicey whether or not you were going to be able to invest in your writing or art career?
Yeah.
Your world and the arts. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, this is not an easy path. And I do not come from a background that has a lot of money. So everything that I managed to pull off, including college, I put myself through college, doing things like UPS, and I waited tables for 15 years, all that. So I've always been willing to do whatever was necessary to support the work. And that was also the reason that I had to choose something that would be commercial from the get-go. I started in literary short stories and, all that stuff. And there was no way that was going to ever pay me enough that I could do it for real.
Yeah.
So I looked around and my sister said, we love romance novels. You should write a romance novel. I'm like, oh, I never thought of that. And I did.
Good for you. That's terrific. I supported myself through journalism. But my brother often teases me that I lived like a pauper. I was working for I had this good job. I did own a house, which actually became terrific because when I sold it for a whole lot more. And that bridged me. Was originally going to bridge me to real retirement age, but bridged me to the ebooks. But I couldn't do it initially because I had to continue working part-time at the Post. I needed that level of income to support the house and myself, and put money into retirement. I can remember very distinctly there was one point where I was really feeling wow, I have no money. What is my problem? And then I realized I was putting 60% of my income into retirement.
Wow.
And I wasn't making that much.
So. That could make you a little bit poor. Well, and I was completely the opposite. I really did. I mean, I've recently been studying the Bohemians, and really, without even knowing it, I took that, that idea of if you are lucky enough to live a creative life, then sometimes you're going to have to suffer. And maybe you're not going to always have the stuff that is considered necessary by society. Now, as I grew older and I had to put my kids through college, and I was a divorced single mother, and that changed my tune quite a bit because I realized then, when you're young, it's one thing to sail along on the breezes. But as you get older, things happen, and kids do need to go to college, and you do need to have a reliable car and all that stuff. It stops being fun after a while.
Do you celebrate the beginning or the end or any place in between with creating a book?
I celebrate the end. I don't celebrate the beginning because that's the hard part for me. But the end, okay. I love when I have sent a book off and it's not in my in my computer anymore. Somebody else has to look at it and tell me how it is at that point. I always spill like $1 million, and we usually go out to dinner.
That's terrific, though. That's good that you do that. I'm not very good about that. Before we get off the other questions, because we're sort of segueing to writing, but I want to make sure I ask you this one. I have my bizarre little desert island, and it allows you to play movies, but for some reason you can only play 3. The same 3 movies over and over. So which 3 movies are you taking to my desert island?
I am going to take The Last of the Mohicans. I always have a little trouble narrowing them down. Love Actually, and it used to be Green Card, but I'm telling you, I loved Lions so much that I saw it 3 times in a period of like 2 weeks. So that would be my other one. I don't know why. I just love it so much.
Well, those are really interesting. I like to try to see. Sometimes I can see connections, and I can sort of see connections. Last of the Mohicans and Love Actually.
I think that they're all epic stories on some level. I mean, Love Actually isn't quite as epic over a period of time, but it is in terms of cast of characters and how it affects each of their lives.
Yes.
I do like that.
Yes. And that there are stories to enter into in different ways.
Yeah.
It's almost like it's like I talk to people if I'm traveling overseas, and they say, "Well, I've never been to the United States," and they say, "What should I see?" Or I'm going to go to New York, and I'm like, "But there's so much else. What do you like? What is there?" And it's almost like you could not. It's not possible to not find something you like in the United States.
Yeah.
There's just so much diversity. And that's some of the same feeling in Love Actually.
That's true.
There are so many different kinds of stories.
There really are.
So, okay, you said that starting the book is hard for you. Now, one of the reader questions, and this specific reader asks where our story ideas come from. And she very nicely says our beautiful story ideas. And she said that she knows of an author who dreams her stories. And then she said that she also knows authors who have the characters just sort of taking up residence in their heads. So how do yours start? Where do your ideas come from?
I think a lot about this because I talk a lot about creativity and voice and how you access your own stories. And so I know a couple of things is that I have a blue jay kind of mind. So I'm going through the world and I'm sort of picking up this idea and picking up that idea. And I noticed that beautiful tree and I noticed a lot of different things, and a bunch of them go into this big pile. And then like the muses or the girls in the basement, as I call them, start putting things into a basket. And then when it's full enough, they just kind of pass it up to me. So I get like this basket full of stuff, and I have to figure out how it all goes together. So here's a woman, and here's like a location. And the first 100 pages, trying to figure out what all that's about is really hard. I have to get the book like sort of up and breathing. And just being really present and trying to listen. But I mean, I have no idea really where books come from. And I think that's one of the things that makes it a little bit scary for all of us, because it's a very mysterious process, right? I mean, how does that happen? And I always say too that the books happen not when I'm thinking about them and I'm plotting out my scenes and I'm color coding charts. It happens when I put my rear in the chair and open up the window and see what's happening. Like, who put that window there? I don't know.
Do you start at the beginning of the book and write all the way through? So when you say the first 100 pages, you're talking about what ends up being that first 100 pages of what somebody reads?
Yes, I write chronologically only. It's the only way I can understand how the story is flowing. I know lots of people do it differently, but I couldn't.
I'm a hopper.
Are you?
So I had one of my 34 editors at Silhouette, and she'd say, "Well, how's it coming?" And I said, "Well, I've got 80 pages." And then together we would say, "But not necessarily the first 80 pages."
Okay, that's interesting.
When you're getting these pieces that are being presented as belonging together, but you don't quite yet see how they belong together, do you know, or do you have a feel of what kind of story it's going to be? Or can that change in the creation too?
I think we're kind of stuck with our stories. So I think that there's a lot of similarity in the stories that I tell. I talk about families, and I talk about, the things that we're trying to overcome, and second chances, and like what it means to really love someone, like romantically, for a long time or for a short time, or after you've had your heart broken. So all of that is kind of in there. But the girls in the basement don't really let me know what the actual story themes are until I'm so far in I can't back out, because they are worried that I will screw it up, and I probably would. I'd probably try to put all kinds of meaning in there instead of just letting it flow or something. Which I don't know if I actually answered your question there, but
I know I love that though, because one of the things that in my bizarre process is I will usually write a third to, if I'm really lucky, a half of the book in these big pieces, and have a vague sense of where some of them go. Sometimes I don't. Sometimes I will write 4 scenes that are going to be spread out all over the book, but they follow a thread. And then there is a point where I have all this stuff and I have to stop and look at it and create, a structure and figure out what's going on. But I'm into it so far at that point that if I don't finish it, I feel guilty, because these characters have come to life. And if I don't tell their stories, they are stuck forevermore in my head, yapping at me.
Limbo. It's a terrible place. Yeah.
It is.
So do you like jigsaw puzzles? I have to ask you, because that feels like a jigsaw puzzle process.
I do like jigsaw puzzles.
And I hate them. Isn't that funny? I hate them. They drive me crazy. So I need to have like a sense of I'm setting the stage. So I'm like, okay, so where is it spatially, and how does it look, and who are the people, and why do they feel this way? And so then once I get like the stage set, okay, then I can kind of move on and get the people moving and figure out their backstories and all that stuff. But then I know what to do. Like the first 100 pages can sometimes take me 6 months, and I can write the next part of the book in 2. So, I guess everybody's stuck with their process.
Oh, and it's almost flipped for me. The first part comes fast, and the people are usually talking, and I won't, a lot of times I won't know what they look like, or I'll know one specific thing about them, but everything else is sort of misty, and the stage set, as you said, is really misty. I won't necessarily even know what they're at loggerheads about, but I can sense that they are, and I can and how they feel about it, and how they feel about each other. Interestingly, that's also what I do with the mysteries. I write the mysteries out of order.
Wow. So do you end up having to do a lot of revision? Do you like revision?
I'm not sure if I like it or not, but I know I need to do it, because there's a lot of but I did so much editing as a journalist that it seems natural to make sure all the threads go through, to make sure things haven't been dropped, that to pick up all those elements. And so I do quite a bit of that.
See, and for me, it's like I'm combing through as I go. Like I'm combing, and I kind of get that done. And then sometimes if I have to add something, I have to go back through and comb it again. So by the time I get to the finished draft, there's usually a little editing that needs to be done, but not so much until I can step back and like let editors say, okay, like you missed some things here or whatever.
Yeah, and I'm editing sentences as I go, but not
ideas or scenes.
Big stuff. Yeah, because I don't know how it's all going to fit together until it fits together.
It's amazing to me that it is so different for everyone, because you think that everybody probably has something close to your process, but no, we don't.
We don't.
Have very processes.
The interesting thing is I find it changes a little bit with each book too.
Yeah, it does. It does.
Yeah. I was at a conference very early on, and there was a panel, and so I was on the panel, and somebody asked, well, what did you learn in your first book that made your second book easier? And everybody else is saying stuff, and it came to me, and I said, nothing. Nothing. It was just as hard, because it was different. And
It's a different book. It's different people. It's different settings. It's different everything.
Okay, another reader asks, do you think about your characters when the book is done? Do you miss them?
I miss them a lot. And sometimes I'll get a letter from someone who's read a book from a while back, and I'm like, oh, they're doing okay. That's good.
Do you ever follow up? Do you write?
None of them have ever come to me to say, I need you to tell some more of my story. If they did, I would. But that hasn't happened.
Interesting. Okay, I wanted to ask you, well, how about other kinds of research? How do you approach it? When do you do it in the process? Do you like it? Do you not like it?
Oh, I really love research, actually. And I mean, like, if you write historical novels, you have to like research, or else, it takes a lot to build a world in medieval Strasbourg, for example, which was my first book.
Yes.
There you go. So I do like research, and I do it as an ongoing part of the book. I don't like to start with a whole big chunk of it. I usually know, like, some stuff, but right now I really need an ER doctor to talk to, and I can't find somebody who has time. Obviously, it's a big thing. So that's the kind of thing I do, and it helps grow the book.
And I love that you're trying to find a person, because I like that, talking to the people, because you pick up so many things that are not there in the written word.
No, I really like the gestures. I remember interviewing a man who he ran the Raptor Center, and I wrote a book about a man who loved raptors. And he was talking about it, he was telling me all these things, but he just kept looking at the sky, and his hand would make this movement, like across the sky, like a bird. It was awesome. And so you can't get that from a book.
So do you have books that you've started that it wouldn't quite work for you, that didn't gel? And if you do, what do you do with them? Do you hold on to them, or do you?
It doesn't happen very often. If I start a book, if I actually get started, I almost always get it finished. I recently had one about a couple of years ago that I still really love this one character, and I just can't figure out what her story is. So I won't give up until I figure out where she belongs. But I did have to put her aside because it was just making me crazy. I usually start a book, and that's the book I'm doing. For whatever reason, that's just how it works.
So you didn't tell the rest of her story either, because the story didn't come around her? Is that?
Actually, I was just going to say, if I finish a novel, I can always figure out how to make it work. So it was that something was wrong in the basic first 100 pages, something about the setup. But I was out of time, and I had to come up with a different story to write that I could actually offer to the world, because it had been a while in between books, and it was time for me to get off this thing driving me crazy and go on to whatever was next.
One reader says, when the cover image doesn't match the character description, how does it feel for the author? And another reader says, how much does it bother you to find editing errors after your book has been released?
It drives me absolutely insane if I find editing errors afterward. Unfortunately, it does happen, but it's agonizing every time. As far as the covers, I would like to have everything look exactly the way it looks in a book, but that's not always possible. And so what I always am imagining is to have the best possible clue to what kind of experience the reader is going to have on that cover.
Oh, that's a good way to look at it. That's really, yeah. Okay, another reader asks, if you could write a book with any other author, alive or dead, who would you want to work with, and why?
I really think I would have to pick Elizabeth Gilbert. Now, I know a lot of people think she's kind of a lot to take, but I love her voice. I love everything she's written. I've read all of her books, and her fiction and her nonfiction, and I love her carefulness, and I love the way she loves the world, and she's really present for whatever's happening in her life and being real with that. Like, she's not Instagramming everything to make it look pretty. She's really real with life and how it flows. And I just think it would be a blast. Plus, she laughs. Like, she has this great laugh. She would be a lot of fun to work with.
That's a terrific choice. I think that's really interesting. I think it's a great question, too. I love that question from the reader.
I do, too. I love that question.
I'm always curious if the relationship between the reader and the author is different depending on the books. And since you've written different kinds of books, can you see different connections, different kinds of connections depending on the book?
I don't know if I would say that I see a lot of difference, but I will say that with my Lark books, a lot of the readers were a lot younger than the readers I had heard from otherwise. And they were extremely passionate. And they would so often say, I've never read a book I loved as much as this one, which sometimes you do hear that from other readers, but it happened a lot more with the Lark readers. And I realized that they were not as jaded. Like they hadn't read as many books. So, they were a lot more open and willing to really fall in love with an idea. It's a really intimate connection, isn't it? I mean, with a reader, it's me and you. That's who it is.
So for somebody who has not read any of your books, though I find that hard to believe, but
I'm sure there's plenty.
Where is a good entry point? Where should they start?
I would say for the women's fiction, How to Bake a Perfect Life is a really, really good introduction to my books. And for romance readers, I would say In the Midnight Rain.
Oh, yes. Yes. How about the historicals?
The historicals, Heart of a Night. It's still my favorite. I really love that book, and I think it's very accessible. And it says a lot about how I write books. So I write historical romance.
And any of the Lark books? Is there a particular one if there's a...
I really think the place you would have to start is Random.
Okay.
It's a series, so you have to start at the beginning.
Do you find that people read all of your genres, or do people...
No,
they tend to go to a specific one?
They do. I even saw that when I was writing contemporary romance and historical romance. There was not a lot of crossover between them. So I just understand that that's not going to happen. Some readers, a few, are really devoted readers, and they read across no matter what I publish, and I love them so much.
Yes.
But mostly I understand that we all are picking for a particular reading experience.
Do you have books that those really loyal readers, even they may not have paid as much attention to as you would like? I think of these as my orphan books.
Oh, I know. It's so sad when that happens too. There is a book that I think is my very, very, very best work. It's a book called The Garden of Happy Endings. It's a Barbara O'Neill book. And it's a story about a minister. And I think that put people off because she's actually not being a minister when she's in the book. And it's not really a story about God or church or anything about that. It's just about a person who's lost faith and the idea of how to lose faith in ideas and people and, how do you go on after some of your icons are lost? And how do you love people? I mean, I love this book, and it really did not get the attention I felt it deserved.
Well, I hope listeners here will give it another chance. And
I hope so, too.
Because it sounds wonderful. And is there anything I haven't asked you that you would like to answer?
Wow, it's been such a wide-ranging conversation. No, I really can't think of anything.
Okay. My other favorite question that I did this to Lou Aronica, was there anything I haven't asked you that I shouldn't have asked you because you don't want to answer? It's just pretty wicked, but you never know. I'm going to get somebody to answer that one someday. Okay, how can readers find out more about you and your books?
The main place is on Facebook, Barbara Samuel O'Neill. I'm there, very present there. And also at barbarasamuel.com, there are links to every other name and venue. And
O'Neill is Oneal.
That's right.
Journalist. And for the Facebook, do you hyphenate the... No. O'Neill Samuel?
It's just Barbara Samuel O'Neill, all one word.
Barbara Samuel O'Neill. Okay. And we will have links in the show notes. So that's much easier for people. So now we get to do my very favorite part.
Okay.
The rapid fire either ors.
Okay.
You ready?
Ready.
Let's go opera or show tunes?
Show tunes.
Paper plates or best china?
Best china.
House decorating or gardening?
Gardening.
Day or night?
Day.
Heels or slippers?
Slippers.
Appetizer or dessert?
Appetizer.
Binge watch or make the watching last as long as possible?
Binge watch.
Ah, okay.
The worst binge ever.
Pickup or sports car?
Sports car.
Hiking boots or cowboy boots?
Hiking boots.
Spring or fall?
Spring.
Cruise or trekking vacation?
Trekking.
Ice cream or cake?
Ice cream.
Daisies or roses?
Roses.
Cat or dog?
Both. Sorry, can't choose.
I thought you were going to make it through the whole thing. Hot air balloon or train trip?
Train.
Coffee or tea?
Tea.
Winter Olympics or Summer Olympics?
Winter.
Nail polish or bare nails?
Bare nails.
Grab the best first or save the best for last?
Grab the best first.
That was terrific. You almost made it through the whole thing.
I did.
You have no idea how few of the authors do it. They're all trying to negotiate.
But I like all of them.
This was wonderful, Barbara. Thank you so much.
It was. Thank you so much.
I really appreciate you taking the time, and hope the listeners enjoyed it as much as I did, and that you listeners will come back next week for another edition and listening to another author who will tell us about the stories behind their stories. Until then, have a great week of reading. That's the show for this week. Hope you enjoyed it, and thank you for joining Authors Love Readers podcast. Remember, you can always find out more about our guest authors in the show notes, and you can find out more about me at www.patriciamclinn.com. You can also send in questions to be asked of future authors at podcast@authorslovereaders.com. Until next week, wishing you lots of happy reading. Bye. If you like this podcast, we hope you'll consider becoming a supporter through our Patreon page. With a small monthly donation as little as $1 a month, you can help with the hosting and editing costs that make the show possible. To thank our Patreon supporters, we offer them special bonuses. Find out more at authorslovereaders.com or at patreon.com/authorslovereaders. That's PATREON. We also hope you'll subscribe to this podcast and leave us a review wherever you listen to us. Both of those help more folks find the podcast. Of course, the very best way for other folks to find the podcast is for you to tell them about it. So we sure hope you will.